into the online broadcast network, AFTERBUZZ TV. Over 20 million weekly downloads in over 150 countries, and your #1 source for after-show entertainment. AFTERBUZZ TV, the destination for TV superfans, producing after-shows for over 300 of your favorite TV shows, interviewing celebrities and showrunners, and bringing you behind-the-scenes exclusives. All thanks to E! Entertainment's Maria Menounos, producer Kevin Undergaro, and internet leader Akamai. Now, let the buzz begin!
Hey y'all, welcome to the series premiere of Showtime's new hit show, without a doubt, The Affair. I'm your host, April Whisenhant, and I am so excited to have watched the first episode of this show tonight. It is absolutely going to be another Showtime hit. I'm always a fan of Showtime shows. Dexter was one of my favorites, but this is going to top them for sure. An all-star cast. We have Dominic West, Ruth Wilson, Joshua Jackson, and Maura Tierney, and you can already tell the chemistry between all of these people is just going to be amazing. So one of the show creators, Sarah Treem, said that she originally pitched this show to Showtime as a drama about the psychological effects of an extramarital affair. So that's what it's all about. You see, we start the show with the star, Dominic West, who plays Noah Salloway is his character's name. You see him at a pool working out, swimming, and you see a lady walk up to him. And, you know, obviously the show is based off of an affair. So I'm thinking already, oh, okay, this guy's gonna like start this right now, just right off the bat. But so you see the lady kind of walk up to him, and she's clearly putting the moves on him, but he isn't having it, you know, walks out. She comes up to him later, and he kind of just like shows her his wedding ring, so he's just not into it. And then you go into the next scene, second scene of the show, in true Showtime fashion, a little bit of nudity, him and his wife. So, you know, he seems perfectly happy at the time. He even later describes himself as, you know, a happily married man with 4 beautiful children, a beautiful wife, and that sort of thing. So it started off differently than I thought it would have, at least. His wife, named Helen, is played by Maura Tierney, and they do seem happy. You know, they start off, like I said, in bed together. They're talking about their children. Seems like a perfectly happy marriage and everything. So basically, the basis of this show is told in 2 parts, 2 different narratives. So it's told in Noah's narrative, and then part 2, it's like halfway through the episode, is told through Allison's point of view. Allison is played by Ruth Wilson, and she is the person who he ultimately has the affair with. So basically, I'm going to break it down into their 2 parts. So, like I said, after everything, he was at the gym, and then with his wife, they are leaving for a trip because they are going to stay for the summer in the Hamptons. He is a New York public school teacher. They live in New York. But for the summer, him and his wife and their 4 children are going to stay at her parents' house in the Hamptons. So you kind of see a few weird things happening. His daughter walks out, his oldest daughter, 2 daughters and 2 sons. His oldest daughter walks out, and, you know, they're like, oh, she's high, something's up with her. And then the oldest son, who's probably 12, 13, something like that, he wasn't in the car, so they wonder where he is. He walks back inside, and his son is hanging from a rope in the bathroom. So, you know, he starts freaking out, obviously, grabs him down. Turns out the kid was joking. He looked up online how to fake a suicide. So, you know, already some like weird family dynamic stuff kind of going on right there. But so they get there. He's an author. He just released his first book, which was pretty well received, but not great. You know, it's his first book ever. We learned that his father-in-law is a very famous author who now writes books that they're making into movies. He hands him a bottle and says, "This is from Paramount." And so he talks about how he kind of feels like he's becoming a sucker and just doing it for the check, but at the same time, he's like, look at what we have here. They seem to have like kind of a very face value relationship, if that makes sense. You can kind of tell that there's a little bit of tension because the father-in-law also says, how's the brownstone? And then Noah thanks him and says, "Oh, thank you for the loan. It's doing well." So you can tell that there's a little bit of like few little digs kind of being thrown in there. But so they spend the day there. They all have dinner together, and then later that night they are him and his wife are in bed again. And I forgot to mention this earlier. So that morning, whenever they were in bed together, you hear one of the daughters yell. She's like, "Mommy, mommy!" And so that interrupts them. And then that night, whenever they are in bed together, one of their other children interrupts. So you kind of like start to feel somewhat of a little like, oh, maybe this could be what like kind of leads to the affair. You know, they're trying to like drop little hints, is what I kind of feel like they're doing. But so the son has had a nightmare. He has to sleep in their bed. So, and she says yes. He looks clearly annoyed by it. Throughout the night, you see the son kicking him and he can't sleep. So Noah wakes up and just goes for a walk down the beach. Well, he walks up on a bonfire with a group filled with people. Something that I am just completely skipping over accidentally. On their way to the Hamptons, they stop at a diner and they meet a waitress named Allison, who is played, like I said, by Ruth Wilson. So you, in the first like moments of them being at the diner, his youngest daughter chokes on something, and Allison kind of starts freaking out and getting really emotional over this, but she ends up like hitting the girl in the back and makes her not choke. And so his son, she runs off to the bathroom, Allison does, and then you see his son go to the restroom shortly after. And so he walks to the restroom to look for his son, but instead Allison walks out of the door, and he introduces himself and thanks her for what she just did to help him, because obviously she just saved his daughter's life. So anyway, back to the bonfire. He walks up on this bonfire, but before he can get there, he sees Allison, who he had met at the diner, obviously, sitting on the beach by herself. So she offers him a cigarette. They talk about how she's not really into the whole bonfire thing. He's not really into it either. So she asks him if he will walk her home. So he kind of hesitates, but it's like, okay, it's just right down the street. So he walks her home, and then she explains that this used to be her grandparents' house, but she moved out here a few years ago and moved into that house. At this time, you have absolutely no idea that she is married, but you learn soon after that she is. She tells him about her outdoor shower that she has, and it's amazing, and he has to see it. He says no, but then she kind of coerces him into coming up and just seeing it. So they walk up there, and she starts undressing and asks him if he would like to join her. He says no, and he has to leave. And so he leaves and walks off shortly after he hears yelling. So, and it sounds like it's coming from her house. So he walks back up, and that's when you see her husband, whose name is Cole, and he is played by Joshua Jackson. You see him kind of like not hitting her, not abusing her, but definitely like being a little forceful with her and kind of tossing her around. And you see him throw her over the car and seemingly begin to force her to be with him. And the oddest thing about this scene, other than that, obviously, is that she's bent over the car, and Noah is at the end of her driveway, and she's staring at him, and she shakes her head no, because he was about to come and stop, and she shakes her head no for him to stop. And that's kind of where that ends. It's just them looking at each other. So throughout the whole narrative, or throughout his whole part of the story, it's being somewhat narrated by him speaking to a police investigator. The police investigator is asking questions like, how did you feel about this? And then he answers, it seems like they're referring to an affair of some sorts, because he's like, oh, I felt great at the time. I don't really remember what happened. It was an odd day. So he's obviously being questioned about a crime that we don't know has happened yet, or we don't know what the crime is yet. So that's how you kind of like learn different things. And when it goes into her part two, one of the probably most interesting things about this story is that the show creators and writers did this on purpose. Both remember different, like basically the same events, but in different ways. So how for instance, how when they're at the diner, whenever she is coming out of the bathroom and he thanks her, but he was actually going to see his son, whenever it's her part, she tells it as he knocked on her door, on the bathroom door, and specifically came just to say hello to her. And other little things are different, but that kind of, and they did that to show how each person sees themselves differently. Each character kind of sees themselves as the hero, is what the creators called it. And they're going to tell stuff from their side and obviously maybe make themselves look a little better than they technically are. I read something that said, the show creator said, obviously with every story there's 2 sides, and with every affair there's 5 or 6 sides, because every person that's connected has a story and has a way that everything happened in their mind. So kind of just something interesting that you can already see happening. So her part starts out with her and her husband in bed, and she you can tell just from the beginning that she is very, very sad about something. She just seems depressed. She seems numb. She doesn't seem happy to be waking up. She cuts her finger and just kind of like stares at it, just very, not creepy, but just in a, I'm really sad. This means nothing to me, and I just cut my finger. I know that sounds weird, but you just have to see it to know what I'm talking about. But she, anyway, so he walks down and talks to her, and he says, let's let this day be a good day. So we don't know what she's sad about. We don't know if she is just, unhappy in her life at the time, if something has happened to her or what. So you see her go to the diner where she works, obviously, and she's talking to some of her coworkers, and her coworker says, is this the day? She's like, yes, this is the day. So obviously we know something has happened on this date in the past. So she then sees this family of 6 walk in, which is Noah's family, him and his wife and their 4 children, and she offers to take the table. She immediately, you can tell that she's attracted to him, that she sees some sort of attraction there. So they're at the table, and just like what happened in his story, his youngest daughter starts to choke. She starts freaking out just as she did in his story as well. And you see her save her, and then she walks to the restroom, and she's sick over it. She is literally physically sick, and is just crying her eyes out. And then that's when you hear him knock on the door and say, thank you, I don't know how to repay you. He's definitely being very, very flirty with her. And he wasn't that way in his side. In his side, it was I'm so thankful for you. But in her side of the story, he's definitely kind of putting the moves on her a little bit. So she leaves there, and then you see her, kind of just traveling around. They're going to a dinner that night at her husband's family's house, at Cole's family's house. And but I guess on her way there, she stops at a graveyard. And she walks up to a grave, and the name is Gabriel Lockhart, with the dates 2008 to 2012. And so she says, she sits and she gets upset immediately almost, and she says, happy birthday, little munchkin. So it's her son has died in some way. We don't know how he's died. They don't say throughout the episode. I'm guessing that's something that we will learn. I kind of wonder if it has something to do with choking, since she got so upset over his daughter doing that. But I also think it could just be a thing of seeing a child that young, maybe around the age that her son was, in distress, that could have just upset her as well. But so she starts reading to him from a book, and then she just stays there for a while and sobs. She looks at her phone and sees that her husband has called her 3 times, and she just ignores it. So that happens, and then she just kind of just sits there for a little bit. And then the next scene opens up to her walking into the family dinner. So something that I noticed on the sign, or where they were having dinner at his family's house, it's Lockhart Ranch, and it says the oldest ranch in the USA. So clearly she is married into a family with a lot of money. Seemingly like a good family. They were all laughing, having a great time, and then as she walks in, everyone gets really quiet. Everyone's had the feeling of walking into a room where everyone's talking about them, but no one was talking about her, but yet everyone got really quiet whenever she walked in. So I think they know she's obviously battling some serious depression. And then, I guess Cole's mom is like, oh, we've been waiting on you, and just tries to kind of like break the awkwardness. She sits across the table from Cole, and it's clearly awkward between the two of them. He looks at her kind of like, where have you been? She just doesn't really say anything, looks away, and just talks. The next scene, she walks outside with a member of the family. I don't know if it's a niece or a cousin or who it is, but they are reading tarot cards. And the family member says that she just recently learned how to do this from a gypsy, I think. And so she gets the card of Lucifer. And I'm thinking in my mind, I'm like, oh, this is going to mean, the death thing, and it's going to make her upset again. But she's like, oh, what does that mean? And the family member had to look it up, and it means it's the card of temptation. And it's something about that something wild and crazy is going to come up to you, is coming to you soon. It'll be very intense, and it will either be something really great, or it will enslave you, what's the last bit. So obviously, that's a precursor for what's about to happen, because we know she's about to enter into an affair. But her husband walks up to her and he's like, how are you? I was looking for you. They have another kind of awkward exchange, and then they talk about going to this bonfire. Well, so while they're at the bonfire, you see, or she's, just sitting on the sand because she doesn't want to be around anyone. Obviously, she's depressed. She doesn't feel like talking, nothing like that. And that's when you see Noah walk up to her. And they kind of have a semi-similar exchange as to what he told, but he is the one doing every bit of the flirting. I don't know if I mentioned this in the first part, but he said that she offered him a cigarette, and in this part, he offers her a cigarette. And then he offers to walk her home because he sees that she's not into it and not having a good time. And he says, can I at least walk you home? So they do that. And he's like, oh, an outdoor shower. I've always wanted one of those. Can I come see yours? Where it obviously happened opposite in his part. So they walk up. He, in this part, kisses her. And that didn't happen at all in the first part. So that's something, I feel like you remember a first kiss, especially a first kiss that's going to lead into the kind of relationship that they will end up having. But he kisses her, she backs off, and he apologizes, says he shouldn't have done it, and then he leaves. So her husband gets home shortly after. Before her husband gets home, she just kind of just strips down, sits in the outdoor shower, and just sits there letting the water fall on herself. So it's just another thing to show you how just absolutely depressed she is. She's clearly going through some, post-traumatic stress from her child dying, even though they make it seem like it's been a while since her child has died. Anyway, so her husband shows up. One of the girls that was at the bonfire dropped him off, and Allison is jealous of this. She's like, what is she doing? He's like, she's a friend. It's not a big deal, whatever. So she starts crying, and she's like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to make this better. They kind of argue because she almost makes it seem like he isn't in pain. And he says, I wake up seeing his face every single day too. I don't know what to do. So then they kind of start, kissing a little bit. Things are getting intense, and he asks her to go inside, and she says no, and she clearly wants to stay outside. So they begin to be with each other, and that's when Noah's character walks up again. And so that was one of the hugest differences in the show, is that in the first part where Noah's character thinks, or they make it seem like he sees her husband seemingly raping her, he in the next part it's completely consensual, and he walks up and is kind of just looking at her like a creeper and kind of just watches the entire thing. So that's where the episode ends. Well, it does go to another scene of her speaking with the detective, because like I said, that's kind of how the narratives are done, by the detective asking them different questions. They both say that, they were, okay in their relationship. She, even describes her husband as being wonderful. The only thing that Noah even slightly says that can kind of show that maybe he's leaning toward doing something is he says something about being restless. All men are restless, right? So that's the only sign that he showed that maybe he's not in a completely happy marriage, or maybe he is slightly bored, I guess. But yeah, so that's where it ends. And so I'm guessing that all the episodes coming up are going to you're going to find out more about what crime is committed, more about, the differences. That's what I'm most excited to see, kind of, is the differences between their two stories unfold, because obviously people remember things differently, like I said, and when you're in a situation, especially something as intense as that, you tend to put yourself outside of it, and you don't remember the details exactly how they happened. So I'm kind of excited to see how they are going to tell that. I'm just excited for it all in general, because it was the premiere. I mean, they really just they did it for me completely in this premiere. It was so good. So I hope all of you enjoyed it as much as I did. Into some predictions for the show.
And now, your AFTERBUZZ TV predictions.
I kind of tried to write down a few, because obviously we're only one episode in, so there are like 1,000 things that I could predict. But I'm predicting that the crime that they're talking about throughout the entire thing is that one of their spouses has been murdered. For some reason, Noah's wife being murdered comes to my mind the most, because it kind of seems like they're questioning him the most about, was he happy, or how were things at the time of whatever this crime happened. So I kind of feel like it could be her being murdered is the crime that they're speaking about, even though they give us basically no hints about what the crime is. So I'm sad about that, but hopefully we'll get some soon. I also am predicting that something is going to happen with one of his kids, and that could be something that maybe brings the two of them together, because I'm kind of wondering how, obviously he's kissed her, at least in her side of the story, so I'm kind of wondering how they'll ultimately pull the trigger if he is so happy and content in his marriage like he's saying that he is. So I'm thinking that could be something that could bring them together, and could be an emotional experience that they could share. And, he kind of leans on her, because I'm sure he'll learn that she went through this with her son. So lots of things I'm sure we're going to find out in this show. Showtime has done a great job with it. Some news and gossip. Basically, it's all about the characters.
TV News.
It's all about how the characters working together and the showrunners. They are kind of doing it to where one person directs each episode, which I really like. A lot of people do that when there are two creators on it. So I'm interested to see how they do differently, how each show creator does it. A lot of people are comparing this to True Detective, and saying that it's because True Detective is set up as the two leading characters are throughout the show speaking to an investigator about a situation. So, I mean, basically that's exactly what happened, except normally you learned that episode in True Detective, I believe, whatever the crime was. Also, Time.com called this, or said about this show, why Showtime's The Affair will be as intense as Game of Thrones. And so I know Game of Thrones is always described as one of the, the craziest, most intense shows out there. So it's definitely intense. The entire time I was on pins and needles sitting up in my chair, wondering what was going to happen next. So it's definitely intense already. So the show is getting, it has a lot of good vibes surrounding it right now. And so I hope that all of you enjoyed it as much as I did, because I loved it and personally cannot wait until next week. You can find us on AFTERBUZZ TV on YouTube, iTunes. Comment, tell me what you think. I want to know what your predictions are as well. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at April Whisenhant, and I will see y'all next week.
From executive producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire AFTERBUZZ TV staff, we would like to thank you for listening to the AFTERBUZZ TV network. To watch or listen to other after shows and post comments or questions, be sure to visit AFTERBUZZTV.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of AFTERBUZZ TV.
Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AFTERBUZZ TV or its owners or principals.